Hey everyone, I'm Zane. I've been helping people optimize their fitness and metabolic health for 26 years. During that time, I've had the opportunity to work on 2 seasons of ABC's Extreme Weight Loss. I've co-authored the book Kicking Ass After 50, and I'm the host of the Healthy AF, that's Healthy After 50 podcast. I started working out consistently in 1988, my freshman year in college. And shortly after that, started doing a little modeling. Let me get there. So I was motivated early on by my appearance, right, to work out. Anybody ever start a fitness routine or change their diet because they want to look a little better? Yeah, it's not forgivable, isn't it? But shortly after, in my early 20s, I developed an interest in longevity. I'd seen my father's older brothers all struggle with cardiovascular disease early on, but he didn't. He didn't. He was always working out. He was running, watched his diet a little bit, as well as we knew in the 80s, right? And he didn't have the same issues. And so I thought, there's got to be a way, things I can do to improve my risk, right, or to avoid metabolic disease as we age. And so I started digging in. I started kind of researching, reading as well. We didn't have the internet right then in the early 90s. So reading, experimenting. I tried some 7-day juice fasts. At one point, I even followed a vegetarian diet for 3.5 years, if you can believe that. So I was eating beans and rice every day, blending up almonds to make my own almond milk because I wasn't in the stores in the 90s. Of course, I lost a lot of my college muscle. And at one point, I got this virus that took hold. It created these ulcers in my mouth, my throat. Couldn't eat for 3 days. My doc thought, I think your body should have been able to shake this virus, but your immune system was depressed by your vegetarian diet. And I didn't like hearing that because I'd worked hard at trying to be, healthy and do it well. But I listened, so I added some fish, some eggs, some whey protein, immediately had mental energy come back. I actually forgot to drink coffee for 3 days within the first few weeks. And eventually my body started recovering from my workouts better, getting some strength back, putting some muscle back on. So I learned my lessons. I clearly needed the animal protein. Fast forward a few more years, I started working as a personal trainer in 98. And that routine of experimenting continued. So I started recommending the low-carb diet to my clients in 2002, 2010. I started playing with intermittent fasting and fasted workouts and recommending that to my clients as well. So it became part of my routine to have a 24-hour fast once a week, 15 to 18-hour fast most of the other days of the week, and ending those fasts many times with a fasted workout 4 days a week. So it's a lot of, these hormetic stressors, right? Thought I was doing everything right, but I started feeling kind of run down. By 2020, year I turned 50, it was catching up with me. I looked good, I was metabolically healthy, but I didn't feel good. And I wasn't recovering from my workouts. Actually, muscles were burning just from just walking around, right? So it's constantly overtrained. It was not it was confusing to me because I thought I was doing everything right? And all these things I was recommending people to do. I was pulling all these hormetic stressors, thinking that there's this benefit, more metabolic stress, the better. But it was clear that I wasn't my body wasn't able to keep up anymore. Again, metabolically healthy, looked good, didn't feel good. So, here's an example. My blood work actually showed the same thing. This top number here that's in the red, that's sex hormone binding globulin, clearly out of range by about 20 points. That is a protein that attaches itself to testosterone in your system that will keep it from interacting with your tissues. So that's not good, right? When it's elevated like that, it's a pretty good sign that you are experiencing some chronic stress or chronic elevated cortisol levels. And so cortisol is supposed to elevate throughout the day, right? It goes up to wake us up in the morning, might go up during a workout or any kind of stressful event. You get angry in traffic, it's going to go up, right? But this is a sign that it's staying high all day long. So not a good thing. The other number here is TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. That is what your pituitary releases to tell your thyroid gland to release more thyroid. Another sign of metabolic stress. So I had to kind of check myself a little bit. I said, okay, I'm obviously not doing something right, even though I'm very married to these ideologies and these approaches. Again, here, fasting insulin at 3, other metabolic hormones, everything looks great there. But I clearly needed a better strategy if I was going to avoid overtraining. And had to admit a little bit, maybe at 40, this was fine, but I'm 50. Had to face the reality. Age makes a difference. So after making a few changes, less fasting, more fed workouts, adding some carbs in, finally got the sex hormone binding globulin down into the optimal ranges. But I didn't make a quick swing. It wasn't like I just started throwing everything back in. It was gradual. So small changes over time. But in that time, researching, I came across this condition called REDS. And it's usually experienced by young athletes who are trying to make weight or improve their power to weight ratio. So they're training hard, but they're following some kind of extreme diet to lose weight, like low carb diet, low calorie diet. And they were experiencing a lot of the same things I did, which is disrupted sleep, decreased endurance. You're just not recovering, basically. Very parallel to what someone might experience who's having a disrupted thyroid function, right? Which we know low thyroid is often a risk factor for low calorie and low carb diets. So I thought, okay, I can't be the only middle-aged guy who's running into this. I thought, okay, there's probably a lot of my clients who are being, taxed by their careers. They have other, life stresses, and they're trying to work out hard. They're trying to do everything, right? They do everything hard, right? And pulling these metabolic stressors. So I thought, okay, I need to figure this out, find out a solution. I found the problem, but now I need to find a solution. So what I'm going to share is what I recommend for building muscle after 40. This QR code will get you copies of these visual notes and some studies. I've included in link to studies that will help support my what I'm sharing. Did you guys get that? Cool. Okay. So if you've been on social media at all in the last 6 months, you probably heard this phrase, muscles are organ longevity. Well, why is that? Well, metabolically healthy, so insulin-sensitive muscle is a great glucose sink, right? So as your blood sugar goes up after a meal, insulin follows, and it will stuff, we have healthy, active muscles, right? It'll stuff that sugar, the glucose, back into those muscles to store for later. Exercise also causes your body to release myokines, which are these little chemicals go all over your body, interacting with other tissues to improve their metabolic flexibility. But there's one in particular called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which improves the neuronal health and activity in the hippocampus, which is important for memory and learning. So your exercise is actually improving your cognitive function as you age. And then, according to the CDC, number one cause of fatal and non-fatal injuries in people 65 and older is falling. Now, we've all fallen, right? We fell as kids. If you play a sport, you fell. If you watch sports, see people fall all the time, right? It's half the sport of soccer, isn't it? Right? People falling down. But they're not debilitated for months at a time. So something about being over 65 and falling, again, these 65-year-olds, they're not running on soccer fields, are they? They're tripping over a chair leg in their kitchen and falling on their own floor. But it's debilitating for weeks or months, putting them at risk for other health issues because of that fall. So we need, obviously, strong muscles, strong bones as we age, or we're going to fall, we won't be able to get up, right? Now, how many of you have ever made a real effort at building muscle, committed yourself to several months of training, that the first 6 to 9 months is not too hard. Even if you don't have a great plan, you're going to get results. You're going to put on some muscle. It's going to look good. We call those newbie gains because whatever you do, it's new enough that you actually make a difference. And after that, it gets more difficult. You've got to have a little more strategy. And if you're over 40, over 50 like me, it's even more difficult. And that's because age isn't just a number. Age is the number one risk factor for death. So, and if you're over 40, you've probably started feeling it, right? Your sex hormones are diminished, growth hormones not what it used to be, immune system isn't responding like it did. I mean, just about anything. I mean, it's hard to recover from even a bad night's sleep, right? So we need better strategy if we're going to continue to optimize our health as we age. We can't get away with what we got away with in our 20s and 30s. And so we're either reducing or we're building. Now, this is just age-related sarcopenia. This is just losing muscle with age. If you're not doing something to hang on to the muscle or build the muscle, you're losing it. And if you do what I did, which is try to work out like an athlete, but then eat like a dieter, your strategies are not matching up. You might get leaner, you probably get in better shape, you might lose some weight, for sure. But you may not build muscle because you've got to fuel that activity just as much as you've got to work for it. So let's understand a little more about how muscles work, and that might help us see how we can build them. Muscles are activated on an as-needed basis, okay, from smallest or low threshold motor units to high threshold motor units, which just means low resistance to high resistance. You wouldn't use the same amount of muscle to pick up a cup of coffee as you would a 30-pound basket of groceries, would you? You'd end up with a face full of coffee, right? So the more resistance you have, the more fibers actually fire, okay? And these low threshold motor units primarily activate what are called type 1 muscle fibers. Now, these type 1 muscle fibers are great for getting you about your day, cruising altitude, right? Cruising speed, get your work done, maybe do some steady state cardio, because they have a good amount of mitochondria in them and they can be trained to burn fat very efficiently, but they don't get very big, right? They're very limited by growth because of that efficiency with fat burning. They're not great for strength, speed, power. They're like cruising speed. And most people have hit their maximum genetic growth potential in their type 1 fibers just by being moderately active. And then we have the type 2 fibers. And they're activated by the high threshold motor units, so more resistance. These type 2 fibers are great for strength, speed, power, and they grow a little bigger than the type 1 because of that. That's just what they're made for. They're made for growth and speed. But because of that, they're more glycolytic. They don't have as many mitochondria. They're not great at burning fat. They're much better at burning glucose. And most people have not maximized all of their type 2 fibers to their genetic growth potential, primarily because of technique, because of their approach in some form, either the way they're lifting, the way they're eating, or both. But this potential for power and this use of glucose also makes them very sensitive to fatigue. So they're easily fatigued, damaged, much more so than type 1 fibers. So that's something to take in consideration when we're training them. And so how do we target these type 2 fibers that are so hard to reach, beyond those newbie gains? There's a few theories. There's metabolic stress, which is what I was creating a lot of. There's muscle damage, and then there's mechanical tension. So metabolic stress, you've all felt it. We feel the burn, or maybe you had a big weight training workout and you feel a pump. Those are all byproducts of the metabolites that are put off by metabolic stress. And so when they do studies applying these metabolites to muscle without resistance training, so they're not doing a lift, they're just putting these metabolites with muscle tissue, they aren't able to induce hypertrophy or growth. It just doesn't happen. And if you think about it, let's think about like a 1 mile runner, so a competitive runner. They're creating a lot of metabolic stress, but you don't see 1 mile runners with large muscular legs, do you? No, they're thin, small legs. We know that marathon training actually reduces the muscle mass in type 1 and type 2 fibers. So it's probably not metabolic stress that creates growth. And then we have muscle damage. You've probably heard this theory too, where muscle is broken down and then built back bigger. Well, when they apply compressive force to muscles in these studies without the resistance training, again, just trying to isolate the stimulus, that compressive force doesn't cause, now there is breakdown, there is repair, but they don't repair the muscle fibers bigger. So think of it this way. Let's say you wreck your car, okay? Your car gets in an accident, insurance company comes out, looks at your car, can we fix it? If they can fix it, they're gonna fix it back to the way it was before. If they can't fix it, they total it, right? and they give you enough to replace the car with like value. So you're not going to replace your Prius with a G-Wagon, are they? Right, so your immune system's the same way. It's going to either fix it, or if it's beyond repair, it's apoptosis, cell death, replace that muscle fiber with something of like size. And if you think about it, if you have a damaged muscle fiber and you go to your next workout, that muscle fiber is not going to be firing. So it's not really much use to have a damaged muscle fibers when we're trying to create growth. They're just not going to be active. And then we have mechanical tension. Now, mechanical tension is created really inside the fiber under maximal force. As you get closer to failure, what happens is, you may have noticed this, you get closer to failure on a set, your rep speed starts to slow down involuntarily, right? So as you get closer to failure, things start to slow down, things are fatiguing, and you really, as hard as you try, you cannot move that weight any faster. So what's going on in the fiber, if you can get nerdy with me for just a second, there's proteins called actin and myosin. And so when your muscle contracts, they're running past each other like this. They're brushing past each other. And as you hit that slow contraction speed, that involuntary slowing contraction speed, they start to slow down, and these cross bridges are formed between the proteins. And it's the forming of these proteins, or these cross bridges, that tell the body to add more protein to that fiber, which is actually growth. And so this theory is pretty well explained. It's called the effective reps model, or stimulating reps model, explained by a guy named Chris Beardsley. So if you want to dig into his research, his Patreon page is a great resource for that. But again, we need the involuntary slowing of that contraction speed to really create the proper stimulus for the growth. And it can be stimulated by heavy weight or lightweight, but I'm going to explain why I think heavier weight is actually more effective. So with heavy weight, when you start, let's say a set to 10, okay, where you would fail at 10 reps, within the first couple reps, you're going to feel that all of the muscle fibers are going to be firing, right? So it's heavy enough that all your fibers got to fire in order to complete those reps. So you have maximal effort, maximal exertion early on. Whereas if you're using a set to say where you'd fail at 20, okay, so you've got a long way to go before you get to failure. And so all those fibers are not firing right away. You got to wait for a few to fatigue before all the fibers really start kicking in. However, you could start experiencing metabolic stress, so feeling the burn, right? And so in the process of trying to get close to failure to get those last stimulating reps in, you're feeling the burn. Like, I don't know if I like this. I think I'm working these pretty good. I think I can quit here because they're starting to burn a lot. And if you don't know any better, you don't know to push through that all the way to failure. And so that metabolic stress might cause you to stop short of where you're really getting the stimulating reps to create the stimulus for the added proteins. So you can do it, you can work towards failure in that state, but you got to be willing to push through the burn. And so how do we know we're creating mechanical tension? Well, in the last 4 to 6 reps or so before failure, those start to kick in, those stimulating reps. It's usually not farther out than 6. It could be 3, depends on you and your set and how much you've done before that, but you're going to notice that right before failure. And it's it's the involuntary slowing. So you've probably seen people talk about a slow tempo training where they voluntarily slow the rep down. So yeah, you're getting the friction between the proteins, but you don't have all of the fibers firing because you're not making maximal exertion. And so at some point in that set, you will get to where you have maximal exertion, but that's what we have the combination of both. Maximal force to get all those fibers firing that we're not reaching most of the time because they only fire as needed, with that involuntary slowing. So what does this look like in terms of sets and reps? Because remember, we're not getting any younger, right? We don't need more things to have to recover from. We don't need more volume or more fatigue or muscle damage than necessary, right? So we want it just enough to stimulate the proteins we add to the muscle fibers, but limit as much fatigue and damage as possible. So there's studies which I included with that link, if you get the visual notes. There's meta-analysis looking at a number of studies all done to failure. And they actually found that sets or doing 4 to 6 sets per muscle group in a workout perform better at creating growth than 15 or 20 sets. And then there's a couple other studies I included because there was one in particular that was all men, okay, all trained men and trained women. Because there's a lot of theories that women need more volume than men to create growth. And they actually found similar results in the 4 to 10 sets per muscle group perform better than doing 15 or 20. Now, if you go on the internet, you're going to see all sorts of, seem like very smart people, very good-looking people saying volume is king, 15 to 20 reps. This is going to, if you're not getting enough growth, just do more. But the literature really doesn't show that. And there's this concept called reps in reserve, or RIR. And that is a number of reps you would stop before failure. So if you have a set that you would do to 10, you would fail at 10. 1 RIR would be intentionally stopping the set at 9. 2 RIR would be intentionally stopping at 8. Pretty simple concept. And they've actually found in studies that doing 1 to 2 RIR is actually more effective than going all the way to failure. Why would that be? 1 to 2 RIR, you're getting enough of those effective reps in, right? You're getting the stimulus. But going all the way to failure actually creates a lot of fatigue and inflammation and even some damage. So by getting just enough stimulus but stopping just short of failure, we're hitting that sweet spot where we have the stimulus but not so much fatigue that it takes us several days to recover from it. And so again, we're limiting fatigue to allow all those muscle fibers to recover faster, but understand that even throughout your workout, fatigue can catch up with you. And that the exercises you do earliest in the workout are going to get the most stimulus for growth. So anyone that you want to, if there's an area that you're trying to build more muscle in, let's say your legs or your chest or whatever it is that you're motivated to do, put that earlier in the workout. And we can learn a lot from the early bodybuilders, so say pre-1950s bodybuilders, because after the 50s, that's when steroids started entering the bodybuilding scene and really impacted, as you can imagine, the amount of volume these guys were able to do and recover from. And so these guys did very few sets per muscle group in a workout. In fact, it was very common for these early bodybuilders to do full body workouts 3 times a week. They do 1 or 2 sets for a muscle group and then move on. Full body, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, with a rest day in between. Some of them more advanced, they got in the 40s, was more like a upper body and a lower body split. So a 2-day split with rest days between, which is actually what I do. But if we think about this, these were the guys at the time. These guys were put in movies, and their approach was a full body workout 3 times a week. You tell that to a bro in the gym, he's going to look at you funny. So rest between sets is always an issue as well, because do I do it 60 seconds, 90 seconds? What's the best rest? If you're doing a set, let's say you stop at 8, you've achieved enough fatigue for that set, and you only wait 60 seconds to perform the second set of that same exercise, you may only get 5 or 6 reps out of it. That's because those muscle fibers we're trying to target, those type 2 fibers, remember, they're very susceptible to fatigue. They're tapped out still. They haven't recovered. So by waiting 2 to 3 minutes between each set, we're going to reach those type 2 fibers they're just, again, they're great for power and speed and growth, but they take a little more time to recover. So giving those 2 or 3 minutes, you're more likely to finish a second set of 7 to 8 reps, repeating the same kind of performance you had in the first set. Machines versus free weights, right? We've heard this argument. What's the goal? Is it athletic performance, or just you want to grow some more muscle and bone as you age? Well, for athletic performance, free weights make sense because you have to stabilize joints, you have to stabilize the spine to perform the free weight, right? You may have a bar on your back or a bar over your chest. There's a lot of energy going to those stabilizer muscles, however. So if your focus is growth, and you're not too worried about, stabilizing everything for, say, playing soccer or, got some demanding sport, machines might be the way to go for you because you don't have to stabilize, so you have a lot more force, a lot more of your energy going to those hard-to-reach type 2 fibers in your primary movers that you're after. And mentally, you're more free to push yourself closer to failure with a heavy weight because you're safe. You're not as likely to hurt yourself, and you're not going to end up with a bar stuck over you. So machines are a great way to go if that's your focus is just growth, muscle, bone density, and safety. Of course, not surprised, sleep is very important for your recovery. In the 80s, we said, we'll sleep when I'm dead, right? We know better now. We need sleep for the growth hormone, especially as we get older, right? Growth hormone, recovery. And I highly recommend using like an Oura ring or a Whoop strap or something to track your sleep so you're getting feedback on the quality of your sleep. Because what we do during the day impacts the quality of our sleep at night. And so then you get feedback, okay, I'm changing my habits. How is this impacting the quality of my sleep? The big one for me, remember I was doing a lot of intermittent fasting, was an early morning meal. I started putting breakfast into my schedule for the first time in 10 years. And over time, it's not an overnight thing, so to speak. It was within 8 weeks, 12 weeks, I started seeing a difference in the quality of my sleep, because that early meal will set your circadian clock as much as early morning sun will. And in addition, I have here, add 30 grams of protein. I also added some carbs in there for that breakfast, which I hadn't done in at least 10 years. And that's because my cortisol levels were elevated, right? They were chronically elevated. They were staying high all day long. And that glucose actually blunts cortisol. It helps make the body relax, and the cortisol levels came back down. So over time, that made a big difference for my sleep. And here's just if you haven't seen Oura Ring app feedback, you've got REM sleep, deep sleep, your body temp, resting heart rate, HRV, respiratory rate. All these things will vary from night to night depending on what you've done many times during the day, or maybe what you're thinking about, what you got going on in your head. How late you ate can impact it. If you had alcohol. So it's some kind of feedback. Are they perfect? No, but it's better than guessing, isn't it? And then eating for muscle mass. As I mentioned, there's training and you've got to fuel it. And this is where I was falling short. So I highly recommend tracking macros and calories if you want to get nitty gritty in this, at least for a while. Now I do it all the time because, again, this was my downfall. This was my blind spot, because I was overestimating my ability to recover without shooting from the hip, right? And pulling out the metabolic stress. And so knowing what you have coming in and what it takes to support your body weight, basically. So you have your BMR, which is basic metabolic rate, right? And then your active calories. Those together create like your maintenance calories, right? So what it takes to support your current body weight with the activity that you are currently performing on average. So you can get that from your smartwatch, Oura Ring, Whoop strap, and then track your food on an app like MyFitnessPal. Right? Easy. You can get your macros and calories coming there and make sure things are matching up. Again, I do this all the time because I'm a geek about this. But if you just did it for a couple weeks to get started, get eyes on what your meals should look like and get an idea, okay, this is what I know I need to eat to support my activity and my current weight and what my goals are. And then come back and visit it, like every month or every other month for just a few days. And make sure you're still on track, like a little check-in. But again, I got nitty gritty. I got a food scale, started weighing all my protein. I counted my grapes. I made sure I knew what was coming in because I knew what was going out, and this was my blind spot before. So I want to make sure I was hitting it right. And then eating at maintenance calories will allow you what we call recomposition. So you'll maintain the same weight, but with all of your strength training, over time, recomp. So less fat, more muscle, same weight over time, okay? If you really wanted to put on more muscle and you don't mind the scale going up in weight a little bit, put on some size, you could add 10, maybe 15% calories over your maintenance calories. You don't need to do this huge bulk that, again, you see these pictures of people on social media eating these ridiculous meals that we all know are very unhealthy. It's silly. 10 to 15% is enough to sustain growth, because we're not putting on 10 or 15 pounds of muscle every month or two, are we? We're talking about slow changes over time. So 10% over is enough to sustain growth. If you're eating below maintenance calories, that's probably not a good plan for growing muscle, okay? If you need to lose weight, great. Lift weights to sustain as much muscle as you can. Hang on to that muscle for as long as you can while you're losing weight. And then you come back and do that when you're at the weight you want to be. But we don't need to, I don't think we need to fear calories. There's a lot of controversy about the relevance of calories. When you're metabolically healthy, calories can make a difference because your body's responding well to the fuel you have coming in. But I don't use exercise as a way to burn calories. Calories is a metric to help me understand how to fuel for performance and recovery. They're a very important part of your recovery. And so obviously protein intake, right? We're building muscle. It's made of protein. I highly recommend 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight as a target. I'm talking about whole food animal protein. I don't have anything against supplementing, but I don't think that should be your main source of protein because there's a lot of micronutrients in animal protein, as many of us know. Very important for other functions, but it's also, I think it's just overall better for what you're trying to accomplish here by getting a real protein source. And because of the anabolic resistance that comes with age, I recommend breaking up into 3 or 4 meals a day. Because with each meal, if you're getting 30 grams of animal protein in one meal, that's going to have enough of what are called branched chain amino acids. So these specific amino acids that signal your body this time to do some repair work. So when you have that much protein coming into your body, you know your body's going to be signaled to, hey, let's go fix some stuff, right? Let's go shore up some lean mass. Let's make sure we hang on to this stuff. Below that, if you're doing 10 or 15 gram snacks, may not be enough to signal it. It's maybe not worth the trouble. So even if you're like a 100-pound person, and your target is only 100 grams of protein, try to divide that up into 3 meals, like 30, 35 grams of protein, rather than snacking your way there and just not having the same impact. You're going to have much more impact with an actual meal worth of protein. I'm going to take the liberty, maybe step on some toes with this one. But I do believe, from my experience, carb intake is beneficial and even necessary to build muscle. And that was my experience. Okay, so I do have studies included with that link that show improved performance, anaerobic performance, growth, strength with a higher carb versus a lower carb diet. And in those studies, lower carb is defined as 25% or fewer of your calories coming from carbohydrates. And so it's these high threshold motor units, right? These type 2 fibers, again, they're very glycolytic, and they just burn glucose very effectively. The other part of that is that anything you're doing to build muscle is an anaerobic activity. Okay, so strength training specifically is an anaerobic activity. Any activity you would fatigue at 3 minutes or less, okay? So it could be sprinting, not that those are going to build muscle, or high intensity cardio, but any activity, 3 minutes or less, 65% or more of your energy is going to come from glucose, okay? Whether you're eating it or not, and I'll explain that in a minute. Even if you're not eating the glucose, this activity has to be fueled by, could be 65, could be 85, could be 95%, depending on the intensity and the duration of the activity. So what happens during an intense activity, or even, again, you get mad in traffic, you have any kind of stress response, the liver is going to break down this glycogen and fill your bloodstream with glucose above normal glucose levels. If you're wearing a glucose monitor during a workout, you will probably see your glucose go up. Fat doesn't get converted to glycogen. You can't break down fat and turn it into glucose or glycogen. Okay, it's too slow of a metabolic process to supply the needs for anaerobic activity. And there is some contribution of glycerol from triglycerides, right? As it's holding the three fat molecules together. Very small contribution from the glycerol. Okay. So I've heard it. Some of you may have said it. There's no essential carbs. Okay. For survival, no. For survival, your body will make the glucose. That's what we're talking about here. But a metabolically healthy person, I would argue that they're beneficial and even optimal, especially for performance and building muscle. What about gluconeogenesis, right? So glad you asked that, because the primary substrate from gluconeogenesis is amino acids. Okay, it's protein. And so what happens is, during gluconeogenesis, you elevate these stress hormones: cortisol, epinephrine, glucagon. Cortisol and epinephrine are stress hormones, but they're also catabolic hormones. You have anabolic hormones, which create growth or preserve lean mass. You have catabolic that break it down. And so these stress hormones are going to break down protein from your muscle, skin, and bones to supply glucose to the liver and the kidneys on some level, which then pumps that glucose into your bloodstream for the activity or the stress. Could be an argument, could be standing on stage and giving a presentation. Whatever creates a stress response, you're going to have more glucose. Okay, and if you've been fasting, this happens too. This is like 8-hour fast. Gluconeogenesis is going to start kicking in when liver glycogen starts getting low. It's a great backup mechanism. It's a great keep survival mechanism between meals. If you're fasting, you didn't have a meal, you have an active day, you haven't had a meal yet, right? You're busy. It's a very slow way to recover, okay, from exercise, right? But I'm going to have to argue if it's a great way. It's a great source of your primary source of glucose. Because if you look at this objectively, we have elevated stress hormones. We have a breakdown of lean mass. Those are two textbook symptoms of aging. So by relying on gluconeogenesis as your primary source of glucose, essentially accelerated aging. So I highly recommend fueling before workout, 1 to 2 hours before workout, with protein and carbs, and then fueling shortly after, within an hour, with protein and carbs again. Again, improve your performance during the workout. That helps you reach those type 2 fibers we're after and give them the fuel they need. Remember, they're very sensitive to fatigue. They're very glycolytic. If they don't have enough fuel, they just won't fire. They will tap out. So fuel them for performance, and then refuel them for quick recovery before the next workout. And guys, when I'm talking about carbs, I'm not talking about Fruit Loops and potato chips, okay? I'm saying eat like your great-grandparents did before the 20th century, okay, 1800s. This chart is from Dr. Chris Kenobi, and you can see here, before the 1900, our primary source of added fat to our diet was animal fats, 100%. And then in the 20th century, we have this new industrial invention called vegetable oils, also called seed oils. And you can see how they track up pretty high to the point that they become more than 30% of the average American's caloric intake during that time. And they're not just for cooking, right? They're in every pretty much processed food in the grocery store. And since 65% of the average American's diet is coming from processed food, we're eating a lot of these oils, more than we ever have. This chart also from Dr. Chris Kenobi, we can see how heart disease has tracked pretty well with vegetable oil there. From 1900, it was almost non-existent, almost unheard of. Physicians rarely saw it, to the fact that it became the #1 killer of men in the early 2000s. There's saturated fat tracking along. Hey, don't mind me, I didn't do this, right? We're eating the same amount of fat. It may look different, may come in different, but for the most part, I see a greater correlation with vegetable oil and heart disease. This one, this is from Dr. Kate Shanahan, tracking vegetable oils with obesity. 1901, obesity rate was 1%. Now it's 42%, tracking to 50% in the next 10 years. This is not genetic. This is, this I think tracks pretty well, tracks pretty well with the introduction of vegetable oil. See this little thin line down here, this little black one? That's carbs. Our carbs may look different now than they used to, but we're still eating around the same amount. They just come in different forms. And this one, type 2 diabetes, again from Dr. Kate Shanahan. She's been calling out these oils for 15 plus years as really the impact, making the impact on metabolic disease. And I have these charts actually in the book, Kicking Ass After 50, and unpack this a little bit more. But we can see this is type 2 diabetes and prediabetes tracking up pretty well from 1950. Why is the tracking start in the 1950s? We didn't identify type 2 diabetes until the 30s. It's like it didn't exist before these oils came into our system. I'm not saying that, but that's what it looks like statistically, because they weren't even, it wasn't even identified. We had type 1 diabetes, but it had yet to be identified as type 2 diabetes, yet to be identified before the middle of the 20th century. There's carbs again, hanging out, kind of like saturated fat. Don't blame me. Now, I'm not saying this to be prescriptive. You find the ratio that works for you. Okay, this is what I found that worked for me. But, you know, prior to the 20th century, everyone was eating potatoes, rice, corn, wheat bread, right? Equatorially, they have fruit year-round. Yet there was no metabolic disease. We have to stop blaming whole food for what processed food did. We don't need paleontology, anthropology, or even nutritional biochemistry. We just need a history lesson that goes back 150 years to see this. Because we created this. We created this current level of metabolic disease. So, whatever you do, one ingredient we all need for our health journey is consistency, right? You need to know your why. You need some pretty compelling reasons to stick with it. This is my buddy Eric, 40 years old, 300 pounds. And there he is, 53, lean, mean, 195. He found his why. I coach remotely. I'm in Tennessee, he's in California. I said, animal protein, whole food, stay away from processed food. Strength train and cardio several days a week. And he did it, right? Or you're like me, it's always been important to me. My why changed. They're my why. And so, my wife, she's right here, 4 kids. There's Jet. Bench pressing, he's right here. He's turning 12 tomorrow. Happy birthday, Jet.
Happy birthday.
I want to leave for them an example of how to stay healthy as we age. So right now, staying healthy is easy for them, right? They're young, but they'll hit all the hurdles that we do, right, at some point. And I want, pardon me. I want them to have seen it walked out and to learn from my mistakes. So whatever you do, forget everything I said, fine. But find your why before you leave this conference. Find your reasons. Because at some point, you're not going to feel like sticking with whatever your health journey is, right? So find something bigger than you that keeps you going. Because we do need to pay attention to what our bodies are telling us, right? How we feel, how we perform, blood work, tracking apps. We also need to remain intellectually curious so we don't get trapped in our own ideologies like I did. This quote, "No single health or nutrition protocol suits each individual. Our unique needs and priorities demand personalized solutions." I took this quote from the Hack Your Health About page. It goes on to say, paraphrase, that we need to have conversations, sharing our experiences so that we can all learn and grow from each other, right? Because if we really want to optimize our health for performance and longevity, we don't need dogma. We need a strategy. So this QR code will get you the visual notes if you didn't catch it last time and the links to the studies. And then did you get it? I have a free download here. It's free40plan.com. We have time for we have 5 minutes. Anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
Based on your experience, what's the best time of day to do these workouts, muscle workouts?
Workouts.
Given everything that we know about circadian rhythm now, what's the best time
Man,
of
there's
day?
so many theories on that. I mean, the first answer I usually tell people was the question is, what's the best time of day to do your strength training workouts? The time you can get it done is the best answer, right? When it fits in your schedule, get it done. What I don't recommend is someone get up at 3:30 in the morning and sacrifice those quality hours of sleep right before, before sunrise and all that. Not that I get up for the sun, believe me, but the stress level that you're creating that early, usually unfed, obviously, is maybe not ideal. But for people, getting before work, I get it. Get it done. Middle of the day, afternoon. Some people say they feel stronger. There's a lot of theories about the benefit of that. But I mean, you're still going to build muscle because you got it done when it worked with your schedule, because you're consistent. And it's the consistency that pays off over time. Okay. So what I would say is, hate to say, if you don't get it this time, don't do it. No, I mean, by all means, get it done when it fits in your schedule. And for most of us being, over 40, we're busy, we have demands on us, get it in your schedule when you can keep it in your schedule. So that would be my not scientific, but most practical answer for that one. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
You said something and I just missed it. You said you want to get your protein in more like 3 bolus meals a day, because if you're just snacking your way through it at 10 to 15 grams of protein, that's not enough to trigger what?
Trigger muscle protein synthesis. So when you have that amount of animal protein, you're going to have enough what are called branched-chain amino acids, which are specific amino acids that signal your body, let's go do some growth. Let's do some repair work. And so it's going to send protein to those muscle fibers to get them either whether fixed, short up, whatever it is from your workouts. But just in general, even if you haven't worked out that day, just to maintain the muscle fibers. As we get older, so for kids, right, they can get away with that because they have enough growth hormone going. We're not so lucky. So we need to actually have something hard enough hitting our body, a signal that says, let's go do some repair work. And it's like that amount of protein that is a safe amount for someone who's, let's say, over 35, 40 years old.
Thank you.
There's some over here. Yes, sir.
When you start talking about carbs,
Yes.
would you prefer like a fiber, like for instance, flaxseed versus a potato? And I'm looking at the GI.
Well, you look at the net carb. So what's the net carb on that? If you have a lot of fiber, you can't turn fiber into glucose, right? So very difficult. Maybe in the gut for those little microbes, but for the most part, for muscles, no. So you need some starch. So if you're looking at a serving or two, a couple servings of carbs, and I said find the ratio that kind of play with it. But yeah, you're looking at starchy stuff like potatoes, white rice, fruit, those things I mentioned. Fiber is not going to turn into fuel for a muscle very quickly. So that's what we want is some glucose in there. Yeah. Yes, sir.
With the diabetes I have like too many carbs, my blood sugar goes pretty high. How can I?
You're going to want to correct the diabetes first, because if you have diabetes, you have insulin resistance, which means the insulin is not able to get fuel into your muscles. Okay, so then you want to strength train to help correct that, but don't expect to start really putting on some muscle until you correct that insulin resistance, because that insulin resistance is keeping glucose out of those muscles. So focus on the type 2 diabetes. If you have weight loss goals, focus on your weight loss goals first. This is geared towards metabolically healthy and at you're around at least close to your ideal weight, then take on the strategy. If you have a metabolic disease, fix that first and fix it ASAP. I mean, that's your longevity right there. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry.
Sets, thoughts,
I'm sorry.
thoughts on drop sets? Drop sets.
Drop sets. Great for building endurance, for resilience, but that's metabolic stress. So you're creating more metabolic stress than you are, and fatigue that you have to recover from, right? So I'm not saying you won't put on muscle with metabolic stress. And the younger you are, or with drop sets, I'm not saying you won't. I'm saying it's more effective for growth, especially as we get older, to limit fatigue and to focus on just the stimulus, which is getting to those last few reps where it's involuntarily slowing down before failure. That's where you're stimulating growth. Drop sets are improving your resilience to metabolic stress, so your resilience to lactate, to hydrogen ions that are coming there and creating the burning. See what I'm saying? They're two different purposes. They're actually two different responses from your body, okay? I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying they're not ideal for growth, especially as we get older. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, while you're trying to recomp, you're eating at a maintenance, and then you're trying to grow and train to failure. As you shift and want to, maybe you're cutting for summer
Sure.
or a show or something, does it then make sense to, as your calories go down, to instead of training to failure, to be doing more volume? Like, would you make a shift based on your goal and what you're trying to do to not necessarily build the muscle, but maintain it as you're trying to recomp in a different way with a caloric deficit? You shift the volume that
Yeah.
way?
Good question.
Or no?
It's easy to say it depends and not give you a real answer. But so yeah, okay, let me start with this. This is not something I'm saying some people have to do all the time. Find 8, 12 weeks, a couple times a year, build muscle. Or if you want to do it all the time, you really want to focus on building muscle, great. But yes, shifting in and out of cycling through different types of workouts and even shifting your diet when that happens, great. I'm talking about what's ideal for building muscle. I think that's a good strategy. More volume, less intensity. I mean, I still wouldn't do 15 or 20 sets per muscle group. I think you're creating too much inflammation, too much to recover from. You could still use this technique to sustain that muscle or hold on to that muscle, maybe do less of it. And if you're trying to cut down, focus on do more cardio, do more intervals training, do some, type 2, type 3 steady state. Shift away from something that takes so much more to recover from. As far as the muscle damage, but we don't want to, I'm not saying don't do it. I've done circuits, I've done, fast-paced stuff, and it does rip you up. It gets you lean. So just be aware of how you're recovering from that if you're going to do it. But I don't think more volume, like do a 30 to 40-minute workout fast-paced, that's enough. I think we just have to be aware of the fact that our bodies don't respond to workouts the way they did when we were younger, and pay attention to that fatigue. If it starts creeping up on us, we're not recovering. We're not, maybe we start feeling run down, it starts disrupting our sleep. Understand that can be coming from too much
Diminishing return.
diminishing returns, too much to recover from.
Okay.
And realize that, okay, that's okay, just adjust. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for the great talk. This is very interesting.
Thank you.
Quick question. You talked about sort of the pros and cons of using free weights and then using machines. Pros and cons of those two. Do you have any comments or thoughts that you can give about variable resistance training or bands?
I love variable resistance training and bands. And neither are bad. It's just that one allows you to focus more. So bands are safe, right? You're not going to get trapped under a band. They're going to allow you to. They're not going to allow you to. You're not going to get stuck in something where it's dangerous, right? So I use bands for a lot. I've used bands for years. I take them into every client session I have. I have some big loop bands. It's amazing, and certainly make them part of your routine. They're very portable, and I love the resistance from them. So yeah, absolutely use them. Understand, and I'm not saying they're not bad. It's just that find something that's safe that allows you to push yourself, and that would probably be one tool, to push yourself close to that failure point where you're not worried about being in a dangerous situation or a situation where you could get hurt. Like I don't heavy bar squat, right? Like I did when I was in my 20s. I go heavy, but I'm going to push a lot more weight on a machine. And so I will vary those and mix that in there because, so it's just, mix it in. I love the bands. It's just use what seems to be working for you, but those are definitely great resistance. I probably said too much about it, but I do love the bands. Yeah. Hi, hun.
Hi. So, you know how life gets away from you, and you mentioned consistency being so important.
Okay.
If you find yourself at the end of the day, or maybe just even in a busy day, and you only have 15 or 20 minutes to do something,
Yeah.
is that enough to have a benefit? And if so, what would you do? What would you suggest somebody do if they really only have 15 or 20
So the question is, if you have a very little time, 15, 20 minutes, is there a benefit to going in and doing something? What would you do? Yes, I would do this. I'd pick 2 or 3, 4 exercises that I wanted to focus on that were like areas that I wanted to make sure I was growing or continue getting stronger with, and do those exercises and understand that you're creating more benefit by doing it than you would if you didn't, right? And just focus on those things or what you feel up for. If you're taxed or rushed, then focus on this. If you're still wanting to grow muscle and that's your goal, find 2 or 3 exercises to do 20 minutes of that same workout. So I mean that's absolutely, definitely worth it. Yes, Lindsay.
On the consistency theme as well, when let's say you go on vacation, right? Maybe
Right.
maybe your hotel has a gym, maybe it doesn't, maybe you're not in a hotel, maybe you're in an Airbnb. What are the exercises you would do, especially equipment typically people maybe they bring a resistance band, but as it also relates to body weight workouts, not only for even travel, but let's say somebody at home too, is a small apartment and they don't have the tools.
I like the bands and the anchors. I've traveled with them. I took them to Costa Rica actually when we were down there and hooked them to things with anchors. I take them into a lot of homes. Body weight's good. I think the important thing, more so than the apparatus, is getting to close to failure as you can with your sets, which can be difficult with body depending on your strength level. So, but I like bands. They're very portable, and body weight is a great combo for those kind of pinch situations. I definitely recommend. I mean, it is about being consistent. But I mean, I think getting as close to failure as you can, you're having an effective set. Does that answer your question? Or, okay, ma'am.
Yeah, so when you talk about the protein and carbs, pre, post, what a part of the fat that the protein comes from, when do you suggest to put the fat? When do you suggest to eat the fats? Will it be combined with the...
My fat, in my diet, my fats come with my protein for the most part. They're in the meat already because I'm eating whole food animal protein, so a lot of them has meat already. I don't add a lot of extra fat because so protein is structure food, right? And then, or should be, we can turn it into glucose if we put ourselves in that position. Fats and carbs are energy food. So I certainly pulled back on the amount of added fats I use. So no, I'm not adding a lot of extra avocado, or I'll put some butter on my potato because it tastes wonderful, doesn't it? But I'm not lumping, sour cream and the butter up and adding extra fats. I definitely pull back on that because for what I'm doing with the strength training, and I like to do some sprints, I like the anaerobic movement, the glucose is much better fuel for that, and it's much better for store. That's what's stored in here, right? It's glycogen, that's glucose. Fat doesn't convert to glucose. So I will pull back on the added fat, but I still eat beef and fatty meats and everything else, so that's what's naturally on board with my meat. Yeah. Yes, sir.
56. My goal is 4 times a week to CrossFit.
Ooh.
Would you recommend any recovery drink at all? Creatine, whey, anything like that?
I think a recovery drink. I mean, I don't want to get into supplementation. I mean, I think that's a rabbit hole. There's, if it has protein and carbs in it, that's going to be a great recovery drink, right? So whey, if you like whey and whey is good for you, I use whole food. I don't think I'm not going to recommend one particular, I wouldn't go there if it's working for you. But a protein and carb combo, okay, I think is your best bet for that, for the recovery. So don't I'm saying don't overthink it. If it's whole food, if it's a shake that works good for you, then do that, because sometimes you're on the go and you got to do it quick. And if you get it within that hour, I think you're going to get a better recovery response, in that not so much more growth, but more you're going to be ready for whatever your day has left for you or the next day. So, yes, ma'am. Behind. Yes.
If you see some pros and cons with one meal a day with OMAD, can you share your opinion on that? Because I know you mentioned like the 3
Right.
Do you see any usefulness for OMAD, or
If you really want to lose weight and you're trying to improve your metabolic flexibility, your metabolic health, I think there's a place for it. Certainly wouldn't do it every day. I wouldn't do it often. I'd pay attention to your stress levels because you are within a 14-hour fast. Gluconeogenesis is responsible for about 55% of your calories coming in. So you want to be careful you're not breaking down too much muscle. So I get my point was to say, while there's benefits to low carb and very low carb and keto diets, there's benefits. Understand the risks. Okay, so there might be something you cycle in and out. Long term, those diets will have, most people will have an impact on your thyroid. They will also have an impact. You're going to elevate cortisol. You're creating stress. So manage the stress. Think about what kind of impact you're having, how often you're doing it, how you're refueling. Food quality is more important than the ratio at times. Now, if you're trying to correct something, be aware of it. Short term, cycle it in and out, figure out what's best for you, keep an eye on your blood work, keep an eye on your sleep. It's going to vary a bit from person to person. Some people, it worked fine for me for about 8 or 10 years. Fine. I wasn't cognizant of it. I wasn't aware of what was happening until it caught up with me to the point I could ignore it. So I'm saying be aware of it, cycle it in and out. I wouldn't do it long term, several days a week, knowing what I know now because of the stress response to it. I would cycle it in and that makes sense. Yeah, and just keep an eye on how your body's responding. I'll take a few more questions before they kick me out of here. Yes, sir.
Yeah, wouldn't it be more beneficial for somebody older starting out doing this to do a higher rep instead of doing a heavier weight, so they wouldn't take the chance of damaging connective tissue, like blowing out a knee or a shoulder or something like that.
Well,
and once they get more into it, go to our higher weights.
I mean, that's relative. Higher rep, low rep is relative, but I think machines are great for that. You could do that if that makes you feel more comfortable. Get your coordination down with the muscle, get the muscles firing again. Understand you can do it, but you got to work close to failure to stimulate the muscle building. That's all I'm saying. So if you want to get used to working out again and get everything firing again, great. But understand that you have to have those stimulating reps that are within the last few reps before failure. It's not the metabolic stress, it's not the burn that's going to cause the muscle growth, it's the mechanical tension. So as long as you're reaching mechanical tension, you're going to grow. You can do it with high reps, but you've got to push through the burn to get right up like 1 rep short of failure to really make that effective. And then be aware of the metabolic stress that's created by that, because that fatigue will impact your recovery and maybe how you recruit those fibers. So it's the risk to benefit ratio again. Like, that's a good payoff for you. That seems less risky because you're less likely to hurt, but understand that means you've got to pay more attention to how close you get to failure to really stimulate the muscle. Makes sense? You got to push through the burn to get to that close to failure. And then work it down and find what works best for you. I'm not saying you have to go heavy. I'm saying to me, it seems more effective and more efficient because of the way our body responds to the metabolic stress. But by all means, you can do it. You just be more mindful of where you are in your set. Yeah. Any more? Let me check with Aaron. How we got? Okay. Well, I'll take one last question back here, sir.
What's your recommendation for people that are getting their health back after years of inactivity and injuries, surgeries, things like that, that are getting back into work now after they've corrected the metabolic?
I mean, machines. Take your time, find what's good for you, hit something between 8 to 15 and just push it. Try to push, spend 2 or 3 weeks getting back to it, waking everything up so you're not ridiculously sore, right? And then as you start pushing up to that failure, you'll notice you can. Just find a safe range for you that you're comfortable. I would definitely stick with machines for that. If that's a concern, you've had surgeries, and go with machines all the way. Yes, okay, one more here. Yes, sir.
What's your take on coffee or caffeine before a workout? Maybe 30 minutes, 1 hour before a workout. What's your...
I mean, yeah, do you drink coffee? I'm not going to say start drinking coffee, but if you already drink coffee, I definitely drink coffee. I mean, before a workout, yeah, it gives you a little caffeine. There's a bit of benefit to performance, especially aerobic performance, but certainly with anaerobic, you're just going to feel less tired. You have more energy. Go with the coffee. Yeah. Sure, absolutely. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.